All right, so good morning, everyone. My name's Wayne Jin. I'm here at Grafana Labs. I run our product marketing team. And so what we do is we do a lot of the content here that you see for the sessions, a lot of our things on our website, and just help our product teams bring these new launches to the market. The other thing I get to do is I get to chair our customer advisory board. So what that means is that we have a really privileged group of folks. We are privileged to have a group of folks that advise us on our product strategy, advise us on things that we're trying to bring to market, and really just be there as a sounding board for us to just make sure that we're hitting the mark and serving our customers in the right way. And so these guys have been on our customer advisory board for a little bit now, and it's been awesome to get to know you guys and just understand like where you've been in your journey with observability, and just to help you guys along that way, right? So they've graciously donated their time here to provide some insights. I'm sure that they have many battle wounds and scars to share as well, but I think that based on the title here, they've all been doing observability for several years now and have reached a point of scale in their organizations to share some hopefully lessons learned. So we want to make this interactive. There is a QR code here, so please, just like yesterday, you can write some questions in the Slido. We also will have some mics running around. I've got a couple of questions prepared. We'll just get the conversation going, and then we'll turn it around to Q&A. Okay? All right, so real quick, just do a quick little intro. Tell us about yourself, your company. Not everyone knows like what each of your businesses does.
Robert Kiesing, Director for Observability and Automation at Sky. So Sky, there are probably two people here who don't know what the company does, but we're providing entertainment and communications solution to millions of customers in UK, Ireland, Italy, Germany, and to some JVs also in many more countries.
Great.
Been with the company for about 27 years now. But most recently looking after a function that is doing alerting, monitoring, observability, operational data, and a bit of anti-piracy as well.
Great. Okay, Alex.
Yeah, so I'm Alex, Senior Technology Manager for Reliability Engineering at Just Eat Takeaway. Been at Just Eat for just over 8 years now. So Just Eat Takeaway is a food delivery and grocery marketplace. So you can get all of your Friday night takeaways and other things, iPhone cables and the like. We look after, or my teams look after all of the observability and reliability, so chaos engineering, load testing, and all of the telemetry data.
Awesome.
So hi everybody, I'm Owen. I've been at BlackRock about 12 years. I had a couple of roles, but most recently took over observability for our Aladdin platform product. So Aladdin is kind of our investment management platform for institutional clients, everything in the money management process, trading, compliance, portfolio management. But my team is focused on, kind of similar to Robert and Alex, focused on the observability of that SaaS business and making sure that we are kind of building to the title of the presentation, right? Building for scale in our monitoring and observability tools. So excited to chat with folks today, and just want to shout out amazing keynote yesterday. Hopefully people this morning really excited about the stuff that we saw, but happy to kick us off this morning.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dalton. Okay, why don't we start with a question here just to get things going. So observability, it's a pretty big word, means a lot of things to different people. I think where I sit in marketing, it's been used in maybe the not purest definition ways, but when you think about observability in your organization, how do you define it? How do you think about it? And ultimately, how does your stakeholders, your leadership think about it? Maybe we start with you, Robert.
Yeah, observability for me is bringing together in one place the visibility of all the operational state of all of the various services. We are a very distributed organization, so we have literally more than 100 technical teams who support some part of the component. It's SRE teams, DevOps teams, application support teams. And historically, they've all had their own responsibilities, often coming with their own instances of some tools. So these 100 plus, if I interpret it as instances of tools, that could be us. And But does not help when you have more complex issues that spread different technology domains, different teams, where you then have calls with 20, 30, 40 people sharing screenshots of graphs, and that's just a very inefficient way of working. And so for us, the main objective here was to address that and really bring in one place everything that any tech team, any support team needs to know, needs to see, down from the very, very low level details up to some SLIs and SLOs for the services.
Great.
Yeah, I think for us, it's really around understanding the behavior of the platform, both when it's running well and when it's not running quite as well. Being able to see what the platform's doing gives us the chance to help the business to make product decisions on what we're doing, how we can add new features, how those features are behaving. So it's really allowing us to make or get business value by using the tooling to understand the behavior and how the platform's being used.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think the other thing that for us, like, there's a very practical element to observability, which is it is the tool set kind of in a crisis, right? So the things that operator teams, operational teams, we have a group of folks called the command center, right? This is their lifeblood, right? You talk about the screenshots or the views that are getting shared around, like that is a very practical element of just being able to enable folks with the right information to be able to respond when we're seeing unexpected conditions. But I think aspirationally, where we want it to be is around being ultimately an enabler for the development teams themselves. Like I think observability needs to be embedded all the way left in the process, right? As soon as you are developing that next feature, that next capability. So I wouldn't say we've completed that journey, but I think being a core tool that developers are thinking about as early as possible is where you're going to get more of that business value. You're going to be able to change the conditions that the tools are running, improve the performance, or even just understand, things like A/B testing and K6, for example. Those kinds of tools are really valuable early. And so I think when we think about observability, we want to be as early as possible in the developer process. So that's a big aspect.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think it's that big thing about being as preventative as you can.
Right.
So let's understand, using load testing, that you can link that in with your observability platform to see, as part of your pipelines, are you going to have a problem? Because you don't want to find out in production that something's going to break. So yeah, let's find that out early. So yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so Alex, maybe we start with you here. A lot of questions that we tend to get is, how do we measure observability? And we all know sort of the classic definitions of MTTR and when you're in an incident, how to improve that whole process. But based on some of where you're going with observability, what are some other interesting ways that you are measuring right now or considering measuring?
So I think stock answer. So yeah, reducing MTTR for our business is absolutely massive. I think anybody that's ordered a takeaway at home, when you're opening up an app and you see a little spinning wheel of death and you're not getting your takeaway and you're desperately hungry, you're not going to hang around and wait for it to come back again. You're going to open up one of the other, I'm not even going to say their names, but one of the other available food delivery platforms.
Very strong signal, right? Hungry.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, you're hungry. You are just, if I'm not getting my food, that's it. I'm going somewhere else. So yeah, so for us, being able to reduce that time that if you are having an outage, the minutes cost a lot of money. So our business is really, really down to being able to get people access to their food order quickly. So if we are down, customers aren't hugely sticky. Mm-hmm. They will go and use one of the other suppliers. So yeah, for us, reducing MTTR is just massive. And having good, strong observability that allows you to get to that answer of where the problem is quickly, hugely important. So being able to have good observability, with the really exciting onset of the generative AI and all of the AI ops that are being announced, and with the acquisition that was, or merger, however it is, that was announced yesterday, absolutely amazing is just how can you get to that answer quickly?
Yep.
How can you go, this is the thing out of all of the alert noise that you're getting, this is the thing that you need to look at.
Yeah, great.
So yeah, that's hugely important.
I think also like we talk about scale and observability, and I think the natural focus is outcome based, which it should be, and the business will be focused on an outcome like MTTR. But we've been thinking a lot about the observability at scale is also about understanding the entire breadth of the platform. And I'm sure many folks in the audience can kind of understand the challenge as the complexity of the software systems that we're running are just exploding, right? I mean, sure, there's models and other pieces as well, but even thinking about cloud providers and, multi-cloud setups and, where you're hosting data versus where you're hosting instances, that kind of thing requires you to have eyes everywhere. And so it may be obvious in some sense, but making sure that every aspect of the stack, thinking about all the way from, client network connectivity all the way up to an application SLO and whether we're breaching an error budget, like that entire set of services needs to have eyes on it from an observability perspective. So do we have all that data that we need? That's a pretty core question that we need to make sure we measure, and the business is evolving rapidly, right? We are always trying to catch up with folks that are building the next great feature or the next great capability on Aladdin. We have to be ready to monitor that and to partner with them to understand it, right? So I think there's a breadth of stack component in addition to an outcome measurement. Both matter, but if there are areas of the stack that you don't have eyes, that can be a real challenge when things make it to production, make it to scale.
Yeah, and then the infrastructure, and it's getting more and more dynamic and quicker, faster change, and ephemeral resources that we need to understand.
Exactly.
It's a lot more complicated as well.
For sure.
I would throw a few more measures. So one is effort, so to investigate an incident. So also adoption. So we have some internal maturity assessment where we see where individual teams, individual services stand with the goal that if I have the gold standard, then we'll achieve the eventual outcomes of MTTR reductions and so on.
Yeah, so a lot of different ways to measure, right? So it depends on where you are along that curve. So let's start with you, Olin, here. As you've thought about your journey so far of scaling, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, is how do you think about the biggest challenges along the way? Because I think your organization's a little interesting in where you've gotten it to, right? So maybe share with the group here, what are some of the challenges you've seen?
Yeah, I think, this is a story like, I heard from several folks at the conference, so I know that I'm not alone in this, but I think where I came into observability, it started to answer this question, but I think for the organization, we began with a focus on open source Grafana and Prometheus, right? And I think a lot of folks started there, but it became a success, and that success became a problem in terms of the scalability of the solution that we could run with the teams that we had. When I came into the role, we had started the process of leveraging Grafana Labs Cloud to help us with that scale, and that started to pivot us. I guess you could steal a little bit from Raj yesterday in terms of the 3 acts, right? So one act is you need to be able to scale the observability itself. If you're worried about the reliability of the data, or you're worried about trimming the data because you're unable to retain it and use it, you've lost the value already. So then that second stage was leveraging the value from something like Grafana Labs Cloud in terms of the feature sets, in terms of distributing it to thousands of users to internally, and then kind of building the capabilities on top of that. You mentioned the maturity model, right? Like, that kind of approach of your bronze, silver, gold is really essential to make sure that once you have those thousands of users, you're actually using the platform. And then I think we're heading into this third stage where the simplest form being the MTTR, but like, how do you measure that value that's coming out of that platform? That is where, almost introspecting or meta inspecting the observability stack. Here's where it's providing value. Here's the teams that are doing a great job and they are reducing their, incident time. Those things are the third stage of scaling challenge. Great, we've solved the data problem. Great, we've solved the tooling and platform capabilities problem. now how are we measuring and showing value back to the business? And I think we're always going to focus on that. That's you never. It's one of those problems you're never done with. But I think that's where we've had those first, challenges, hiccups, whatever. And now we're focused on new areas. And I think you guys have had some of those similar experiences, right?
So it's very much similar. So one thing perhaps I wasn't so clear at the beginning of the journey is that there are different reasons why people use the platforms, why people come on it and on board. They can have their own intrinsic reasons that are valid for that team to achieve something that they want to do. But to do it in a standardized way that gives wider benefit is quite different. So I think we've been through this phase of kind of success-driven adoption, but now going through making it more standardized, making sure that we really get the original outcomes that we wanted to achieve from that, or not just people onboard it and use it. And yeah, I mean, there are some great uses. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's completely surprising. So one team used it to measure some S3 storage bucket usage for where they store films and achieved very significant savings through that. So that wasn't planned originally, and it's a great use.
Right.
But still, we shouldn't lose sight of what we originally intended this for, and that's a bit harder to achieve.
Do you think there's a tension between the standardization and customization? Because I feel like the history of Grafana has been like the platform that is immensely customizable, right? The whole dashboarding workflow and all of that.
Yes.
But it sounds like you've kind of pivoted a little bit in thinking about those standard flows and those more opinionated flows, right? So there's a little bit of tension there.
Yes, I think so, and I think to have more availability of opinionated views is the right direction to go. Not necessarily mandating it, but going towards having that available in the toolkit and driving it.
Where are you on that journey?
So I think one of the problems that we had was, which actually I think is probably something that would be true for a lot of people, is when you start off on your observability journey, you don't really have many standards in place, and you're just, here's a bucket, throw everything. And which is absolutely fine until you hit the sort of hyper-growth, hyperscale bit, especially through startups, that you just end up spending your on-call people spend up every evening trying to stop your observability platform from falling over.
Yep. Tough weekends.
Yes. Yeah. That is what we went through. We had the self-hosted Prometheus and Graphite Stat-C stacks. And you're just trying to hold absolutely everything that's being thrown at you. So yeah, being able to, when we moved to Grafana Cloud and being able to send all of our metrics, that stopped us having to look after these massive, great big clusters of basically just looking after storage. So yeah, being able to move to Grafana Cloud really, really supported us in that. So yeah, I think being able to set standards hugely important, so that you can, whether or not you're looking at opting in to what you want to send versus just sending us everything.
And what does that engagement model look like? Like, is that meeting with individual teams? Do you guys have a method of like publishing out something?
Yeah, it's really about understanding what your teams need from their observability. Our DevOps teams are really good, and they understand their observability platform right from the get-go, so they know what they need. But there is a huge education piece to say that some engineers, you need to tell them that they cannot just send absolutely everything. The adaptive metrics, really huge. If you're not alerting against something and you're not graphing it, do you really need to send it? In some cases, yes. Mentioning that it's really good to have almost a data lake of observability telemetry data, because sometimes you don't quite know that you've got a use case for it yet. But there are certainly some things that some metrics you don't need to send, so don't send them.
Yeah, it was like the Hello World example yesterday, half a terabyte. Yeah, probably don't need it.
Yeah, don't need that. And you get lots of interesting development techniques where
you might block sending debug logs, so people change their debug logs to be info and send them anyway. So it's being able to catch some of those nefarious challenges.
All right, so let's go to a question from the audience here, which was one that's similar to what we'd planned for. What are some of the most impactful mistakes you've made during your journey with observability? So lessons learned, mistakes along the way. What can you share with the group here? Maybe Robert?
Well, with one false start with labeling. So we took one particular initial approach of our labeling standard and then revamped it. So I wish we hadn't done that.
Okay.
Needed a take two. Yeah. I think maybe not a mistake, like pivoting the question slightly. I think one of the really interesting things is finding the right initial audience. You mentioned that initial kind of almost startup-like stage, right? Where adoption is your key measure, your key metric. And I think what we found is early on, we attempted to go very broad with those set of folks that we brought into the platform. And what we ended up seeing is much more of a power user curve, where a small set of people internally, I would shout out, like kind of that SRE function, especially that partners with us. Those power users have an outsized impact internally. And I'm talking about, single digit percentage points of the overall user base, but they are driving the outcomes for many of the teams. They are watching the presentations and panels at conferences. They are contributing back to the open source. Like those, it's I think enabling those power users early on is something we ended up having to hustle to do, because they are doing quite a bit of education. And honestly, Wayne's job, that marketing piece internally, right? And making sure that folks are excited about the stack that the platform team is putting together. So I would say really focusing in on a core internal audience that helps you evangelize really makes a difference when you're then going and expecting other teams that have less experience. You could bring those power users to those engagements, and it really helps get a footing in places where folks aren't.
I couldn't agree more with that one. That was our approach as well. So that's an initial team that was already familiar with the technology, but very open, very collaborative in attitude as well. And then we were able to show some initial results based on those MTTR metrics, for example. So we had something really valuable to show, and they're great champions. So if you're watching this, James, hi. No, it has been fantastic, and that has really driven adoption and also convinced some of the teams that were really skeptical initially.
Yeah, I think engineering engagement is really important as well. So not just going after not trying to do everything in one go and try and boil the ocean, but making sure that you're creating something that your engineers want and need. There's a few times where we might have gone down the route of, if we build it, they will come. Mm-hmm. And then you build it, you offer it, and they go, yeah, we don't really need that. So yeah, engineering engagement, make sure that you're creating something that your engineers want to adopt and want to use.
Yeah, just double clicking on that a little bit. How have you done that internally, the marketing within? So how do you get more engineers aware, adopting, trying things out?
I think it's a case of finding those power users. So you start off with a small group, and they evangelize themselves as part of the development community. So they'll show off something that they've done. We have a monthly what we call operational excellence meeting, where all of the engineers come together. We go through lessons learned for any instance that we might have had, and also we have teams that show something that they've done. So you're able to have your power users talking to the rest of your engineering community and really showing, look at this really cool thing, and it's helped me get to a root cause of a problem quicker than it used to. And then people start contacting you and go, oh, I saw this really cool thing. How can I get involved?
That's interesting. We have like an office hours concept that's very similar, right? And the goal, we've actually brought Grafana to a couple of those as well, but the goal is to kind of, show, not tell, right? And the more that you can engage people kind of where they are and bring it to a use case that's, say important in the trading space or in the compliance space, right? And demonstrate that, then people can start making connections to their other business lines or their product lines, right? So I think I also think generally we've taken a pretty strong view lately that there's a community element. And again, I'm not trying to sell ObservabilityCon per se. I'm just saying that I think collectively, like in this room, for example, the amount of expertise is something that I think we all should be interested in tapping into more collectively. And I think there's real value in figuring out, not necessarily the right way, but strong, effective techniques to monitor certain kinds of systems, right? I think paved paths are really, really important in this space. So I think we're seeing that that's another way to engage those teams, is to say, listen, we think you should have A, B, and C from, an SLO perspective, and give people data on, who is far along in that journey and who is less far along. Is that maturity model kind of concept? I think that's really important to help teams know where they stand, and then have the power users or the examples or the paved paths that they can go on, where this doesn't, the last thing you want to do, I think, and we talked about this last night, like you do not want to have this be yet another task on the task list. You want to turn this into an enabler for those folks. So as much as possible, bring it to their use case means, oh, this actually helped me. This actually help our product line. So trying to get out of that zone of this being yet another thing on the list is pretty important.
Yeah, we've also set up a structured internal community within Sky of a nominated observability champion, because it's a complex organization. So we couldn't bring all engineers together, for example, something like that. It's impossible. So we had nominated, and then regular sessions where we demonstrate, show and tell of what people have achieved, and those sessions really have sparked a great interest.
Yeah, I think we have guilds all over the place in Jet for all different manner of things. And we have a observability guild. People come together because lots of engineers have got a real love for observability. I mean, it helps their day job. So they want to get involved and they want to support the journey.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to take a note here. Guild. We don't usually say that as often in the States. It sounds very, very fancy. So we're going to start using that to get more people to join. Okay, so there's a lot of questions coming in from the audience. This is great. I'm going to try to theme some of these a little bit. There's a few questions around org structure and org dynamics. So Robert, this is one for you. As a telco provider, how much overlap is there between the NOC and observability functions?
So the telco functions, they all have their own character. So I wouldn't say that we see them in the same way. I'm responsible for both sides of things here. And yes, there are specialized solutions that look at the telco world. Equally, it's getting more and more into a Kubernetes app deployment world where telco solutions are really deployed like enterprise services. And for those solutions, we apply the same approaches of monitoring, of observability, of dashboarding that we do in the rest of the enterprise world. So it's almost like we're splitting our telco estate into the kind of modern application side of it and the more classical telco device side of things that are just dealt with through their own device managers or specialized telco fault and performance management tool.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's pretty industry specific there, right? What about you guys? Like, is there interesting ways that you've organized observability teams, or has it shifted over time, and how do you think about that?
I think for us, it's definitely shifted. Originally, we had a platform engineering team that kind of did absolutely everything, which meant that a lot of things would not get as much love as they needed to because you can't do everything. And when you're looking at prioritizing stuff, something's going to have to fall by the wayside. So we made an organizational change where we split out platform engineering into its own sort of components. So we have a reliability team that is split out into platform assurance and observability. Then we have a CI/CD team. We have sort of a platform infrastructure type team. So you're then able to focus on a specific area of your platform, and that allowed us to move a lot faster.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, the team structure, I think, has been around for quite a bit of time. I think one of the interesting things we're seeing is we've invested a lot in observing lower and lower down into the stack. So I think a lot of folks think of observability and they think of a top level SLO for an application, but the more and more we can collect from the lowest components in the stack, the less people have to instrument themselves. And I don't want to step on the presentation coming up next, but I know there's more great work on the Grafana side in terms of thinking about how to monitor at deeper levels. But organizationally, one of the things we're seeing is if you have a lot of these signals and you've done a lot of the groundwork and you've brought that into an ecosystem like Grafana Labs, it almost starts to become more of an SRE or an engagement challenge than it does an operational platform challenge. There's always the platform to maintain, of course, but I think what I'm seeing with my team is we are starting to think about going out into the business more and more and bringing best practice, bringing the right approaches or standards, and sitting kind of within the business and trying to partner very closely, because that's a way the business will get the outcomes they want, the MTTR reductions, the other things we talked about, but they will also, we will have the partnerships, and we will then have more of those established paths as we want to say roll out a new feature set. We want to introduce profiling or something like that. We have the partners that we can work with. So I think from an org perspective, starting to see us move from that platform ownership more exclusively to being now more of a team that's willing to be embedded in the org is really, I think, going to be an enabler for the next stage of our growth.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're looking at doing is once you're no longer worrying about having to look after your own platform and you're able to send, you're using Grafana Cloud a little bit more and sending everything over to that stack, it allows you to go out and, be an enabler for teams, move that dial on reliability, embed in teams almost observability consultancy.
Yeah, exactly.
And going out and really helping people to move that dial.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we do have mics. So if anyone wants to ask a live question, just raise your hand and we'll have a mic runner come around. While we prepare for that, I'll have one question here. There's another theme around, we talked about observing further and further down into the stack, into the components. What about going up? So questions around how do you connect to the business? How do you think about business process observability, things like that?
Oh.
Maybe a little more challenging than going down into the infrastructure.
It's kind of the key question in some ways, right? Because I think I mentioned earlier, right, the transition, this third stage in terms of how you focus more on value, ultimately, and we talked about this yesterday, right? Context, right? Context of the data that you're collecting is ultimately how you're going to draw that line. And it's very easy to look at millions and millions of time series, ingesting all of these logs, right, as value in and of itself. The business doesn't see it that way, right? Not until that data is translated into a narrative or a process or a story do you actually get to leverage that value. So I think it goes back a little bit, I'm stealing my own answer. I think it goes back a little bit to that consultancy element because I'll give a tangible example, right? So when we want to engage with some of the folks that own the messaging platform internally, we need their expert views on that system, but then you need to combine that with a very, very opinionated view of the right way to observe said system. And so it's bringing together both that view of that internal system and kind of expertise of it with the expertise of the right way to monitor. I don't know if you can just organically achieve that, right? I don't know if you can turn a dial yourself and get that without partnership within the business. So ultimately, it comes down to more and more engagement there. Obviously, there will always be a set of teams, and we probably all have a couple in mind where they just raised their hand and figured it out themselves. They read all the docs, they wrote all the configs themselves, and were like, we know what we need. Those teams are awesome. We love them. But I think, my view is that ultimately you have to really sit with the business. And if anyone has shortcuts to that, I would love to hear it. Let's chat after. But I think that's been what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned SLAs quite a few times, and I think that's a hugely important thing that we're looking at doing, which is moving away from the standard waking everybody up because you've had a CPU spike.
The reactivity.
Yeah, and it's more about having SLAs based on your business outcomes and alerting on SLOs, not just alerting on absolutely everything, because that's the important thing. Yes, you want 5 nines on everything, but if your customer's not going to notice anything, that's the important bit, is when is my customer feeling the effect of something that's happening, and tell me before that happens.
Right.
So yeah, SLOs, and how you set SLOs, you need to talk to the business. The business are the ones that need to set that. So yeah, engagement with business, huge.
Great. Okay, let's go to audience right here.
Hi, my name is Yasser Saleja and I work at Goldman Sachs. My question is primarily directed at Olin. Do you feel that your work has added a lot of value for the unique regulatory requirements your teams face being in the financial services industry?
That's a good question. From a regulatory perspective, it's certainly not my expertise, first of all. But what I would say is that concept of breadth in the stack and observing kind of bottom to top every component that makes up the platform. In a lot of ways, what I think is going on in the regulation space is needing to be very clear about how that works and need to be very transparent about it. And so my general view would be that observability can contribute more and more into like kind of telling that story. In some ways, I think that's the maturation of the tool set, whereas maybe before it was seen as purely an application kind of tool, right, for the individual product lines. But if you can build a breadth-wise view, it can be an input to those kind of processes. That's basically how I see it.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, let's do one more here.
Hi, Robert. This is a question for Robert. I'm Chandra Dikshit. I'm from Computer Center. You touched upon NOC, ways of working with NOC a little bit. So the question is, do you now see the IT side of your telco, which is producing the services, running the services, and NOC, which is network, working closely together because we have come to a place where it's more observability rather than monitoring?
I mean, in all parts of the organization, like it is a lot more about doing more automated and putting less eyes on screens and triggering runbooks, etc. So, there is still a kind of enterprise IT side, which is in our world at least quite separate from what is really supporting the telecommunication services directly. So the mobile services, the broadband, and every component of that, which is what we call it, SRC, is responsible for. That's still actually quite separate from other classical IT services. But there are more and more observability approaches and techniques, as I said before, where they are using applications that are just really, really complex and distributed. It's in particular in the mobile world, it's just really, really complex, and probably
people who don't know that, don't have that kind of insight, just how many different components there are that interact. And we use the Grafana in that space as well to really get a very simple and easy overview from all the many different places.
Less fragmented war rooms, basically.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
All right, thank you then.
Okay, all right. We've just got a couple minutes left here, so probably get to maybe 2 more questions real quick. This one's a little bit spicy, I think. Not too crazy, but we talked about adaptive metrics here, right? We all know the cost pressures, what's happening in the economy with budgets and everything. Is there a concern that this feature makes users not worry as much about whether metrics they publish are actually useful? So I think the spirit of it, right, is if you just have people send whatever and think the system will take care of it, are they accountable for that, right?
I think that one thing that was certainly missing for us was teams understanding the TCO of their application. So yes, they when you're looking at cost management or cost ownership, yes, they may well understand their infrastructure cost if you're in cloud, but observability for a long time was just a black box. So they might not understand that their little feature that doesn't do a huge amount for them, but a small little feature could be sending way more metrics, way more logs that they shouldn't be sending, and could be a massively costly impact. So being able to raise those the total cost of ownership of a feature is something that I think teams need to understand. I remember we had one team that was sending debug logs for a feature that was using 25% of the logging cluster that we had at the time, and we would call it a tier 4 feature. So it wasn't part of the core order flow, but yeah, it was just sucking up money. The team had no idea. So being able to make sure that they understand the total cost of their features, huge.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think adaptive is a win. Like my view is it is, if nothing else, observability on the observability, right? In terms of what you are collecting and the relative sizes of those things. That has value, whether or not, to what level you focus on fitness or TCO or those concepts. You need that data. And we were about a quarter of the way down the road of trying to build that feature internally when Grafana made it part of the platform. So I think that's the indication that it's important enough that you need it. How you manage kind of your applications, footprints and the teams and the politics and the budgets and everything else is one thing, but that feature is a net advantage to have regardless. So.
Yep, great. All right, I think we're just coming up on time here. So maybe just real quick, one word or a couple words. What are you most excited about for the future of observability? Anything, any particular capabilities, particular areas that you're looking at?
Looking at the future together with AIOps.
AIOps, okay. Yep. Alex?
You stole mine.
Sorry.
Yeah, AIOps and generative ops. Yep.
Yeah.
You guys saw asserts, right? You guys saw that? That was yesterday. My word is asserts, yeah.
All right. Yep. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so this is funny. We're going to take this full circle. Alex, the question came in. Given Alex's aptitude with spinning chair, did you have any previous designing Apple's click wheel? I don't know who wrote that, but what? All right, we're going to end on that one, okay?
Amazing.
Okay, so let's give a round of applause for our panelists here.